JSA issue 7, Jeff Lemire writing with Rafael DeLaTorre on the art. So that's an artist change for sure, because he was not on those first 6. I'm positive of that. But this deals with the aftermath of Wildcat's death, and mostly revolves around the funeral and sort of the conversations that take place after that as well. There's a lot of Jay giving the eulogy and whatnot. I will say this for this issue, is that this is by far the most focused of any of these issues so far in JSA.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think because of that, I do think it's the strongest issue that this book has had, just because it has some fundamentals that the other issues simply did not.
That's fair. I think I have a conceptual problem with the issue, though, is that I just don't care, because I don't I don't buy what it's doing with the death of Wildcat. So I haven't bought into that emotion.
No, I get what you're saying.
Giving me. So it's on a craft level probably the best issue. It still have no connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was very particular with my phrasing, because I was like, oh, it is, I think, clearly the best issue of the bunch. But it does also, the landing of it kind of hinges on how much you bought into, how we got here. And simply, I don't think many of us do feel that we really bought into what was happening before this, because it was so haphazardly told. I think this issue, though, does stay quite focused. There's a natural sort of through line where it goes from the eulogy to Yolanda feeling like she doesn't deserve the moniker and tries to give it up and says she's done being Wildcat, which leads neatly to the sort of the heads of the team talking about how, oh, there's still something going on here, there's still members missing, we can't just forget about that, we have to do something. Which leads into the Justice League stepping in and saying, hey, we should probably help take over with this because you're clearly messing everything up. They say it much nicer than that. Well, Batman doesn't, but Superman does. And hey, we should try and help you with this. And that makes Alan and Jay kind of pissed off, and they're like, no, you're the youngins here. We're the originals. We'll deal with this. Because even when it did switch towards the end of the issue to the Valhalla dimension or wherever it is, we're in, and Hawkman's there with Hawkgirl and this new Kid Eternity. Even when it switched to there, I thought, okay, you know what? They've spent most of this issue so focused on one clear through line. It's all in the aftermath of the funeral, that it's okay for them to do something different towards the end. It's still much better than before. But even this ended up tying into everything from before, because the reveal at the end is that all the dead JSA members, now including Wildcat, are reaching out to Kid Eternity here and saying, hey, the JSA's in trouble and you need to be the one to save them. And we see the other, because again, this is Lemire doing something smart, is that in the eulogy he had Jay say, hey, Ted's went and joined, and he names a bunch of the dead JSA members, so that at the end here, yeah, they are all together, they are looking out for the team from beyond. I think there's some stuff here that does work just sort of on its own in a pure craft level. I kind of agree that, obviously, because I didn't really care about how he died, because it wasn't that well told, it doesn't quite have the impact that it should. I do agree with that.
Yeah, like I say, I think from a craft level, clearly the best. But because so much of this issue being successful hinges on you caring, I still think it kind of falls flat, despite it being objectively better than most issues of all issues of this series up to this point.
Yeah, I guess the hope is that it keeps, on a craft level, being as good as this. And if it can keep doing that, then, at some point the stories will have evolved enough that it won't matter that we didn't care at the start anymore.
I agree. I think it needs to get through this. We did Ragnarok, now we got this Valhalla stuff. I think it needs to get through that and get it done with, and move on to something simple and just tell some simple stories and build from there. I think this book kind of went in too wild at the start, and it's still playing catch up, and it's gonna hurt it.
Yeah, I think it went in too wild. I don't even necessarily think the core concept that he wanted to play with was a bad idea. It's just that he went too wild with how many different threads there were, and try to keep track of them all. It should have really focused on one part of it first. Let us care about that one part, and then do a one shot later about one of the other groups or something.
Yeah, I think because we didn't care about any of the. Okay, I say that we come in with our pre-existing attachment to JSA, but the book does nothing to go, this is why you should care about this team in general, before it throws in a scenario as wild as that and splits them all up so much. I think it really needed to do something simple first, get a baseline, establish to people who aren't as familiar with the teams, just like create a team environment before you break them all up so much.
Yeah, and like there's still characters missing inside, like Obsidian and Jakeem, right? They're still inside like the head of whatever, right? Like they're not in the real world still, so they're still missing. Like we've got these separate groups. Obviously, Hawkman and Hawkgirl are missing over with Kid Eternity. Like I can't even remember. They never figured out that Obsidian's not really Obsidian right now, right? Because we know what the real Obsidian is, but they don't.
Yeah, I don't think they did. And like, there's a point at the end of the conversation between the JLA and the JSA where Alan goes, this is our team, our family. I'm like, I'll buy it. You've not done anything in the previous 6 issues to make this feel like a family.
Mm.
And like that's where this issue kind of really falls down. It hasn't earned to do something as intense as this funeral, and like this should have all this emotional baggage to it. To do that so early in this book, I don't know, it feels so unearned, and that like I kind of found myself checking out of it because of it.
It's because usually I often want comics to be more fleshed out, or sometimes I want them to like not like linger, right? But it's rare that I come into a comic, and now that we've like done the first arc, even though there's a lot of things still left dangling, which clearly are still to come, where I think to myself, I actually think it should have started 3 issues earlier and like built up to like where it was in issue 1 and give us like time to, have some of the characters go missing, have some of these relationships be established where they're now fighting, because in this issue, like one of the conversations we glossed over is the conversation between Jesse Quick and Our Man, right, young Our Man, where she's basically saying, hey, I want to be like solo for a while and figure out who Jesse Quick is, and he's kind of pissed, and it's like, it's like they're breaking up. It's like a breakup where she doesn't want to really call it a breakup, but that's how he feels about it. And I'm like, I feel like there's been like 1 or 2 scenes in the entire 6 issues that have even like shown that they're a couple, and it felt like so weird to me. And I get that like them being a couple isn't new to this series, but like this is not something where you can just assume the audience like cares about them being a couple, because I don't know.
Yeah, it's not about having the knowledge, it's about having the attachment. And that's where this series is really failing, is that I can see logically, oh, that's what this is trying to do. This is how I'm supposed to feel because I know this information about these things. But it hasn't made me feel any of these things. It hasn't done that baseline establishment to begin with before you subvert it and break all these expectations and change the dynamics here. This just feels like, well, we might as well have just started like this and I'd feel exactly the same.
It almost feels like we started in the middle of a run. Like there was like all this, like, because we're already having characters like breaking up, and it's not even just these 2. There's other relationships that are kind of like in weird places, and I'm like, you really needed to like establish some of this stuff first in this series so that we'd care when they start to break down. Having multiple relationships already be in a rocky place just feels like, okay, like there's like artificial drama from this because you're having them say the lines, you're having them feel the awkwardness. But I'm not feeling anything from it because, I didn't care about them being a couple yet. And I know that some of these relationships are pre-established in other books, but it's not like they were in that John series that just happened before this one. So, like, when was the last time we were talking about these relationships? It was probably quite a while ago, in some of the cases.
And again, like, there are probably a lot of people who have never read a JSA book at all before this.
Yes, that's also true.
And I feel like they are probably having a horrible experience with this, but even worse than us. At least we've got the like, for example, we have an attachment to Wildcat in general, right? Like going back years. And we still feel basically nothing reading this run. If you don't have that attachment to like Wildcat, if this is your first JSA book, yeah, this has got to be just miserable, surely.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're getting out of it.
And it's such a shame because I think one of the things that I love about the the John's JSA book is how much it does build my connection to the characters. Like there's a lot of like team building and character building throughout, and it's not like there's not big stories happening almost right away, because there is.
No, but I think it's very notable that that book starts with a smaller team and expands and builds arc by arc, like who it's adding to the team. Whereas this feels like it started with the full JSA roster. Just this is everyone, and we're going to deal with all of them at once.
Yeah, we have 4 generations of JSA all at the same time, and we have to juggle them all. And yeah,
I almost feel like this bit that we're getting at the end here, where it's Kid Eternity dealing with the dead JSA members. Like we could have started with that. Imagine if we just started with Kid Eternity with the Hawks, and then they stumble onto here's the dead JSA like members, and be like, the JSA's in trouble. We need your help. And then we're introduced to the rest of the present modern JSA through that. I feel like there's so much more like you can connect to the book through a much more natural state that way.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately it all comes down to, regardless of the order he chose to do them in, I think everything should have been like done individually. There should have been a whole issue that was just following one group of characters and what their deal is in the current situation. Whether it's the characters that were in the Tower of Fate, the characters who were dealing with the main stuff in the in their base or whatever, and then like the Obsidian and Jakeem stuff. Like each of those should have been like a one shot where it just focused entirely on them for the whole issue, and let us get into like, okay, how do they feel? What predicament are they in? Make us care about their own thing before you start jumping between them and mixing them up.
I feel bad because I feel like we're just saying the same stuff that we've been saying since like,
I know,
issue 3. But like, and even though this issue doesn't have those specific problems, everything wrong with this issue is because of those choices over the previous 6 issues. Like that's because fundamentally there's nothing wrong with this issue on its own. In theory, this is a good issue. This is in theory the best issue. I mean, it probably is still the best issue, but in theory, it should be a really solid issue. But because of the way that the story before it was told and kind of really like butchered from a form that it could have been, this issue is not very good, despite its craft being much better. It still suffers because of what came before it.
Yeah, it's frustrating. This entire series has been frustrating, and Lemire absolutely can do better than what he did here.
Yeah, and I'm tempted to say I'm done with this book now, and like, because I don't know, every issue I read it, like I'm just like, well, it's just going through the motions almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy enough to read that I'm not like. Don't get me wrong, like out of the books I was reading this week, this and Two-Face were the ones I was looking at and going, oh, these are the ones that are a little bit of a chore because of how I feel about them. And Two-Face didn't make the cut, this one did, and maybe it's just because I do at least like these characters a bit more, or maybe it's because there's a hope that it'll get, because this was like the first issue after the first arc, so I thought, oh, maybe this will be a sign of it getting better or something. And in some ways it kind of is, because it is better, but it obviously it's still hinging on so much of what it's already set up that it's not free of it either, so it's in a weird place. I'll probably still read it for a while, at least. I mean, that's it. I'll keep reading it until just 1 month. I'll go to read my books. It'll be on the list, and I'll say, I just don't want to read that this time. And then that'll be it. That's how I drop most books. Most books aren't a decision I make when I've just read one. It's usually when I go to read the next one, and I'm like, oh no, I've got a feeling in my gut that I just don't not want to do that.
I do that. Like, I didn't. I know you did the same too. Like with Two-Face, it wasn't like an intentional. Like I'm not going to read that in advance. I knew. I looked at. I had 2 issues to read. I was like, I don't want to read 2 issues of that book. I just don't.
Yeah, the times I decide that in advance is typically when it's an issue 1, because you read an issue 1 and you go, oh, that was terrible. There's no way I'm reading any more of that. That's when you decide in advance. But when it's something you've put a few issues into and you just kind of at some point say, no, I don't want to, it tends to be when I have to read the next one and I realize just how little I want to.
That's fair. I think I'm like, with this, the reason I'm saying it now specifically is because there was always that hope that, oh, well, it's just the first art being a bit messy. And then I had this issue, and while it's in theory better, I still found myself like, I'm just going through the motions reading it. And I'm like, And I feel like, okay, am I just reading this out of pure optimism next issue? Am I saying I'll read issue 7 or yeah, 7 the next one? 8?
No, that's a 7, so next will be 8.
So yeah, I'll read issue 8 just because I'm optimistic that it'll get better, but
I
don't know if I believe it will.
Reading out of optimism is better than reading out of obligation.
Yeah, that's true. Can't argue with that.
It's a little better. So
The problem is, like, especially with the launch of the Absolute Universe and like more books being added constantly, there are so many good books that DC are publishing right now that even these ones that are average as opposed to outright bad, like these ones that are average seem like more of a chore now. But when there's more options of good stuff to read.
Yeah. All right. Well, what are you rating JSA issue 7? Just to wrap that up.
I'm going to give it a very positive 5.
Yeah. My rating is a 6.